One of the most evil and brutal women of the Second World War was a senior guard inside of the concentration camps. Maria Mandl was a woman who was in charge of thousands of female prisoners, and she also taught other female guards how to instill a reign of terror during the Second World War. As the Allies liberated many of the camps, there was a horror around every corner. For example, at Bergen-Belsen, the camp where Anne Frank succumbed to the conditions, the British discovered 10,000 unburied corpses all around the camp. At the end of the conflict, Maria Mandl was brought out to her execution inside of a Polish execution chamber and prison, and she was accused of a huge number of crimes, and specifically was said to have been responsible for the executions of hundreds of thousands of people. But what is the story of her execution and her crimes? Maria Mandl was born in the January of 1912 inside of Austria, and she became a senior figure inside of the Nazi movement in Austria. At the time, the Nazi party in the country was banned, and after the annexation of Austria, she joined the SS retinue. She then, as she was one of a small group of women who volunteered for service in the death squads, would see regular work inside of the concentration camps. Her first role as an Ausfahrerin, or female guard, was inside of Lichtenberg, one of the earliest camps found inside of Saxony. Mandl worked alongside around 50 other women, and the site held male prisoners to begin with, and then it turned over to become a women's prison, as the majority of the male prisoners were then sent to other sites which opened up across Hitler's Germany. But inside of the prison, Mandl and her guard staff began to beat women. Sometimes they beat them to death, and during one incident, 2 women who attempted to escape the camp were savaged by the guards' dogs, and they were ripped to pieces. But following the expansion of the concentration camp system, Maria Mandl was sent to Ravensbrück near to Berlin, and this was a brand new camp established close to Berlin, and it was an all-purpose female-only concentration camp. Mandl worked here as a supervisor on the first day that the camp opened, and it grew to a huge extent. But as the Nazis conquered more land and territory, Ravensbrück grew as more women found themselves imprisoned at the hands of the Nazis. But Maria Mandl became a brutal guard and someone who displayed a huge amount of cruelty. Himmler, the head of the SS, visited Ravensbrück in 1940, and he permitted guards to punish prisoners using weapons, and he allowed floggings, and it was often Maria Mandl who administered the beatings to the women. This was often 10 to 25 lashes administered, and it was known that 25 lashes could be deadly. But in some instances, some women were sentenced to 75 lashes, which was practically a death sentence. But Maria Mandl was a brute, and she even revived a number of prisoners so that their beatings could continue following them losing consciousness. But there were prisoners who were deformed for life by Maria's actions. Because of her brutality, she was selected by the SS to go and work as the head supervisor of Auschwitz-Birkenau. This was the main extermination element of Auschwitz, and it was used as a killing centre for hundreds of thousands of people. Maria Mandl replaced another woman as the commandant of the women's camp, and her devotion to the Nazis and the way she treated prisoners was what led to her promotion. Her reign of terror over Auschwitz-Birkenau led to her being known as the Beast, and she continued to administer barbaric punishment upon the prisoners. Mandl was then part of the selections, and when inmates came to the site, they would be sorted. Those who were not fit enough to work would be sent straight to the gas chambers, but those who were fit enough to work were admitted to the camp. Mandl personally even drove many men, women and children into the gas chambers, and she patrolled the yard whipping prisoners to get them onto the trucks as quickly as they could. Maria Mandl also picked prisoners to become test subjects at the hands of Dr. Josef Mengele, the Angel of Death, and many of the inmates were slaughtered in this treatment. However, at the end of the Second World War, The courtroom in which she was brought following her arrest was told of her brutal treatments. They also heard of the horrific experiments involving women prisoners, in which their ovaries were removed forcibly, and many were then sent to the gas chambers after this. They also heard of how Maria Mandl forced thousands of prisoners to stand to attention in their bare feet in the snow, and then these prisoners collapsed in the temperatures, and many suffered terribly with hypothermia. Maria Mandl tried to maintain that she had always been caring towards the prisoners and that she had never treated the prisoners badly. But the problem for her was the sheer amount of witnesses who spoke otherwise about her actions. It was found out that she held huge gatherings and parties inside of her villa near to Auschwitz, and Mandl held these parties after long rote sessions. Because of her role inside of Auschwitz-Birkenau for over 2 years, it was claimed by the court that she was responsible for the deaths of around 500,000 people, mostly children and women, who were sent to their deaths inside of the gas chambers in Auschwitz. Following the liberation of Auschwitz, the Soviet Red Army soldiers spoke to the prisoners, and many told of their treatment at the hands of the notorious female guard. But Maria Mandl could not be found, and she had left Auschwitz in the late 1944, and she was moved to a subcamp of Dachau. The Allies and the Red Army came across different camps, and they discovered many different concentration camps. Maria Mandl fled into the mountains of southern Bavaria, and she was then arrested after the war on the 10th of August 1945 by the American Army. During her interrogation, it was found that she devoted herself to exterminating thousands of people. But she was then sent to stand trial at the Auschwitz trials and the Polish People's Republic. Maria Mandl often bowed her head when the witnesses testified about her actions, but she was found guilty of crimes against humanity and war crimes by the courtroom relating to her work inside of Auschwitz. But she was then sentenced to death, but whilst awaiting her execution inside of a Polish prison, Maria Mandl allegedly claimed she wanted to apologise for her actions and she wanted to get forgiveness. But on the 28th of January 1948, inside of Krakow prison, one of the most ruthless Nazi prisons inside of Poland, Maria Mandl was executed. She was condemned along with 20 other war criminals, and Maria Mandl was the first to be executed as she was a woman. At precisely 7:09 a.m, Maria Mandl was led into the execution chamber along with 4 male prisoners, and she was stood under a meat hook in the ceiling, which had been assigned for her. A noose was attached to it, and there was a box next to it for her to stand on. The guard helped her onto the step and the box, and then he attached the noose around her neck, and then simply kicked out the box, and Maria Mandl was left hanging. It took 15 minutes for the first group to die, as each of them slowly strangled to death. And following this, Maria Mandl was then declared dead by a doctor. Maria Mandl was a woman who was known for her horrific treatment of prisoners inside of the concentration camps. She was a woman who executed and tortured thousands of people, and she, as outlined by the Polish courtroom, was allegedly responsible for the deaths of 500,000 people. But inside of an execution chamber, she too was condemned to death. Her evil stranglehold over the women of Auschwitz saw her become a fearsome brute, and a woman who earned her reputation as the Beast of Auschwitz. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.